Some stories start with love. Mine starts with silence. The kind of silence that creeps into every room of your childhood home. The polished floors, the floral wallpaper, the neatly folded napkins on the dining table. The kind of silence that says, we don't talk about that here. Not pain, not fear, and especially not feelings. My name is Corinne Whitlow, and for years, I pretended my life hadn't started with a scream into the void. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White shutters, magnolia trees, Sunday church, and linen dresses. We were the kind of family people pointed to and said, they've got it all together. But no one saw what happened behind closed doors. From a young age, I always felt different. I was sensitive. I cried when other kids laughed at things. I questioned things I wasn't supposed to question. I wrote poems in the margins of my math notebook and stared out the window more than I paid attention. By 15, I had started experiencing what I now understand were panic attacks. Back then, I just thought I was broken. One night during my junior year, we were at a gala my parents had donated thousands to host. My father stood near the governor, laughing with a glass of bourbon in his hand. My mother was adjusting a silk scarf and pretending not to see me crying in the hallway. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. I whispered, I don't feel right, and she barely glanced at me. She turned to one of the event staff and said, could you take her to the restroom? She's being dramatic again. That night, I locked myself in my bedroom, shaking. The next morning, my mother made a few phone calls. 2 days later, I was admitted to Bonner Oaks Behavioral Hospital, a private institution on the outskirts of Charleston. The kind of place where wealthy families sent their difficult children. I wasn't asked if I wanted help. I wasn't hugged or reassured. I was handled. I was 16. I remember the moment like a photograph burned into my memory. The beige walls, the smell of disinfectant, the paperwork being signed in a reception area filled with watercolors and brochures. My mother didn't stay long. Just long enough to sign the forms and whisper in my ear, don't make this any harder than it needs to be, Corinne. This is for the best. The best for who? Inside Bonner Oaks, everything slowed. They took my phone, my books, even my shoelaces. I wasn't violent. I wasn't suicidal. I was scared and silent, and apparently that was enough to be locked away. There were rules for everything: when to eat, when to sleep, when to speak. I learned to nod and smile, and not say too much. Speaking too honestly earned you extra observation. Crying made them call your parents. And mine had already made it clear they didn't want calls. It was 6 weeks before I was discharged. When I came home, it was like I had been erased from the family photo. My brother ignored me at school. My father stayed late at the hospital more often. My mother told our neighbors I had gone to a leadership camp for troubled youth. I asked once, why did you lie? She replied without blinking, because truth makes people uncomfortable and your issues aren't anyone else's burden. That was the last time I ever asked her for anything. By the end of the year, I had quietly applied to out-of-state colleges. I took a job at a bookstore near the community college, stacked shelves during the day, and rode the bus home at night. When I got my acceptance letter to UT Austin, I didn't tell anyone. I just left. No goodbye. No confrontation. No closure. Just a duffel bag and a bus ticket. I told myself I'd never look back. But that was a lie. Because you don't escape your past by running. You escape it by owning it. It's been nearly 15 years since that chapter of my life. In that time, I've built something powerful from the brokenness, a nonprofit called Restore Blue, focused on advocating for young people who've been institutionalized or discarded by their families. We offer legal support, counseling, and most of all, a voice to kids like I once was, scared, silenced, and alone. And last month, I signed the final papers on a deal that's still hard to believe. We purchased a group of outdated psychiatric facilities across the South. One of them, Bonner Oaks. The same place that told me I was unfit to be in the world. The same place my mother left me with a pen stroke and a perfectly set hairdo. This isn't revenge. It's reclamation. It's about rewriting the ending I was never given. I haven't told anyone in Charleston. Not yet. But I will. And when I do, I won't whisper. I'll speak loud enough for every girl locked away in silence to hear. I used to dream about going back home. Not for revenge. Just to be seen, for someone, anyone, to look at me and say, "We were wrong." But time has a cruel way of making you let go of those fantasies. You learn not to expect apologies from people who think they did nothing wrong. Still, I never imagined I'd return to Charleston like this. When Restore Blue finalized the purchase of Bonner Oaks, I sat in the quiet of my Austin apartment and stared at the papers on my kitchen table.
The ink was dry.
The deal was done. I was officially the new owner of the institution that once swallowed me whole. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I started planning a soft launch. Nothing flashy, just a quiet conference in Charleston announcing our intent to reform and repurpose the facilities. Bonner Oaks would no longer be a place where troubled teens were locked behind smiling staff and pastel brochures. It would become a true healing center, with therapy led by people who'd been through the system themselves. Lived experience would replace clinical detachment. We called it the Benton Initiative, in honor of the only woman inside that place who treated me like a person, Dr. Lydia Benton. She once snuck me a poetry book under my pillow. She told me I wasn't crazy. She said, "You're not broken, Corinne. You're just hurting." She died 2 years ago. I never got to thank her. The week of the conference, my team flew in early. I stayed behind for a few extra hours in Austin, unsure if I was emotionally ready. Then, on a drizzly Thursday morning, a sleek white envelope arrived at my office. No return address. Just elegant script across the front. Ms. Corinne Whitlow. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my mother's. Inside was an invitation to the 23rd Annual Whitlow Family Legacy in Medicine Gala, a black tie event held every spring at the Charleston Civic Center. The same one I had once been dragged to in a floor-length dress at 17, the night I had a panic attack in the bathroom stall and was later accused of ruining the tone of the evening. I hadn't been invited since. The irony? The gala's new theme this year: redefining mental health in the South. I laughed when I read it. I didn't mean to, it just came out, sharp and bitter. My mother had spent decades pretending I didn't exist, and now she was raising money in the name of the very issue she tried to bury. I turned the card over. It said, "In honor of pioneering voices in youth mental health." I couldn't tell if it was a cruel joke or the universe nudging me. I didn't RSVP as their daughter. I RSVP'd as CEO of Restore Blue, the nonprofit now funding a complete overhaul of Bonner Oaks, including a public audit of its historical treatment practices. The gala was scheduled 2 nights after the press conference. I arrived in Charleston quietly. No cameras, no announcement. Just me in a nondescript rental car, driving past landmarks that still made my chest ache. The church where my mother led Sunday readings. The sandwich shop where I'd eat lunch alone in high school. And finally, Bonner Oaks itself, sitting behind its high hedges and manicured facade, looking eerily untouched by time. I didn't go in. I would soon enough. That evening, the conference at the Civic Center was packed. My name wasn't on the promotional materials. We had decided to keep my identity quiet until the announcement. Most of the crowd assumed I was just another executive flown in from some big city nonprofit. When the host stepped on stage and said, "Tonight's keynote speaker is someone who brings lived experience, innovation, and bold vision to mental health reform in the South," I walked out in heels that made my legs tremble. My voice didn't. "Good evening. My name is Corinne Whitlow. I'm the founder of Restore Blue and the new owner of the Bonner Oaks facility." There was a beat of silence before the room shifted. Some gasped. Others whispered. My mother, seated near the front row, visibly stiffened. She didn't look up. My father, 2 seats over, reached for his water glass with trembling hands. I didn't flinch. I was institutionalized at Bonner Oaks at 16. I wasn't dangerous. I wasn't violent. I was inconvenient. I'm here today not just to reclaim my story, but to make sure no other child is discarded the way I was. When I finished, the applause was slow, uncertain, like no one knew which side of the story they were supposed to stand on yet. I didn't care. That night, I stood outside on the balcony of my hotel room, watching Charleston glow under yellow street lamps. Then my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. How dare you use our name like that? You've embarrassed us. Mom. I stared at the screen, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel that familiar drop in my stomach. I just typed back. You were never part of the story. I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm here to end the silence you built your reputation on. I turned off my phone, and I slept like I hadn't in years. I wasn't surprised when she showed up unannounced. 3 days after the press conference, I walked into my office at Restore Blue's Charleston branch, temporarily set up inside a renovated library building, and found her waiting. My mother, Judith and Whitlow. She wore her armor, a navy suit, pearl earrings, and that same perfectly smooth hairstyle she'd had since I was 12. The receptionist whispered nervously. She said, "She's your mother." Should I? I took a breath.
No.
It's fine. When I entered the glass-walled meeting room, she didn't stand. She looked around like she was inspecting the space for flaws. "This place is quaint," she said, her voice coated in sugar and condescension. I sat across from her. "Why are you here?" I asked without softness. She folded her hands over her structured purse. "I came to have a conversation, woman to woman, before this little crusade of yours goes too far." I almost laughed. Little crusade? The arrogance still pulsed in her, unchanged by time. But what stunned me wasn't the insult. It was how familiar this dynamic still felt. Me, trying not to fold. Her, pretending she held the moral high ground. Too far. I repeated. "Do you mean shining a light on how many families have used mental health to exile inconvenient children? Or purchasing the place you sent me to so I could make sure it never happens again?" Her eyes flashed. "Don't turn this into a personal attack." "It is personal, Mother. You locked your daughter away. I got you help. You silenced me." The words were louder than I expected. They echoed slightly, enough to make her flinch for the first time. "You don't understand what it was like," she said, voice sharper now. "You were spiraling. You embarrassed us at every public event. You cried over nothing. You wouldn't listen. I was sick, and you treated me like a stain on the furniture." Silence. That hung there between us longer than I could stand. "I needed you," I whispered. "That night, the gala? I was barely hanging on. And you walked me to the bathroom like I was someone else's child. You let strangers take me away." Her lips quivered. And then, for the first time in my entire life, my mother's voice cracked. I was terrified. I blinked. She looked down at her hands, the cool veneer slipping just enough for me to glimpse something I never thought I'd see. Doubt. "You were so fragile, Corinne."
And I didn't know what to do.
"Your father, he just kept saying you'd grow out of it. That you needed discipline, not coddling." And she paused, pressing her fingers to her temple. "I believed him. I believed if we hid it long enough, it'd go away." "And when it didn't, you hid me," I said. Her silence was her answer. "I used to think I was a burden," I told her. "But now I know I was just inconvenient to a family obsessed with appearances." She didn't deny it. Instead, she tried to shift the conversation. "There's an audit being called on the Whitlow Foundation," she said. "You realize the damage that'll do?" I leaned back.
Yes.
"That's the point." She blinked again. "You're trying to destroy everything we built." "No," I said calmly. "I'm trying to rebuild what you refused to see was broken." And then I told her about the letters. Letters from other girls who had been sent to places like Bonner Oaks. Teens institutionalized for things like kissing someone of the same gender, crying in public, writing dark poems. Girls who never had a Dr. Benton. Girls who left those places worse than they went in. "They wrote me," I said. "They trusted me with their stories. You know what they all have in common?" She didn't answer. "They thought it was their fault," I said softly, just like I did. Her hands trembled slightly on the table, but still no apology. Just more silence. After a moment, she stood. "I don't think we're going to agree on what happened," she said, voice stiff.
"No.
"We won't." She started to leave, but before reaching the door, She turned back. Your father wanted to come. I raised an eyebrow. But, he said, he didn't know what he'd say to you. That makes two of us. And with that, she walked out. I sat there alone for a while. My body felt heavy, not broken, not wounded. Just tired. A tired that comes from carrying the weight of being unseen for most of your life. I didn't cry. But later that evening, as I read another letter from a girl in Kentucky who had just aged out of the foster system and thanked Restore Blue for helping her find a therapist, I did smile. Not because I'd won anything, but because she had. Because every painful part of my story, every moment I was shamed or silenced, was now fuel. This wasn't about making my family look bad anymore. It was about making other kids feel like they could survive. And that was worth everything. The night of the Pearson Gala, the air in Charleston was unusually warm for early spring. A hush had settled over the city. Like it, too, knew something important was about to happen. The venue, a repurposed botanical conservatory, was packed with people in navy suits, cocktail dresses, and curious eyes. For once, they weren't there for a donation tally or another empty speech. They were there because of the headlines. Because of what I'd revealed. They were there for the girl who came back. I stood backstage, looking out at the garden through the glass. Lights shimmered off the pond. Strings of white bulbs wrapped around the trees like fireflies. I could see Tyler waiting in the front row. My husband, my anchor, the only person in my life who had never flinched when I unraveled. We met when I was still learning how to talk about the institution without breaking into a sweat. He didn't try to fix me. He just asked questions. Listened. Made space. It was his idea to name the new initiative after Dr. Benton, and he insisted I be the one to lead it, even when I said I wasn't ready. You're not just ready, he told me. You're necessary. Now, as my name was called, I stepped onto the stage. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't small. I was here. I looked out at the crowd and saw not just faces, but stories, some mine, some yet to be written. My name is Corinne Whitlow. I began, my voice steady. You may know parts of my story by now, but what I want to share tonight isn't about the pain. I want to talk about what came after. I told them about Restore Blue, about the Benton Initiative, about our plans to create trauma-informed centers across the Southeast, staffed by survivors and clinicians who understood what it meant to be silenced. I spoke about the importance of safe spaces, about how not every scar is visible and not every diagnosis is a curse. And then I paused. I scanned the room slowly, and there, halfway down the aisle, standing in the back, I saw her. My mother. Not dressed in her usual pearls. No clipboard. No makeup. Just her. Looking like a woman unsure of her footing in a world she no longer controlled. We made eye contact. Briefly. And in that moment, something in me shifted. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just release. I finished with a story I hadn't told before. Not in public. When I was 17, I tried to take my own life. I didn't write a note. I didn't cry. I just wanted to disappear, quietly, because I believed no one would notice I was gone. I paused. But someone did. A woman named Dr. Lydia Benton. She sat beside me in that sterile room and said, "You're not broken, Corinne. You're just hurting." A hush fell. I named this initiative after her, because her words saved me. But I'm here tonight because of every girl who never got to hear them. By the time I stepped down from the stage, people were on their feet. Some clapping, some in tears. Tyler took my hand and kissed my knuckles. I held on to him like I was anchoring myself to the present. Later that night, I stepped out onto the balcony of our hotel room. Charleston glowed below, soft and distant. I could still hear music from the gala echoing faintly in the streets. My mother hadn't stayed. I wasn't surprised. And oddly, I wasn't angry either. I turned as Tyler joined me, 2 glasses of ginger beer in hand. "She left right after your speech," he said gently. "I know," I replied. "She wasn't ready. Do you think she ever will be?" I took a long sip, letting the silence answer. "Maybe," I finally said. "But I'm not waiting on it. I looked out over the city that once held every version of me. Shy, silenced, shattered. And I realized I didn't hate this place anymore. It didn't have power over me.
It was just a backdrop now.
Not the story. He wrapped an arm around my waist. You're different tonight. I smiled. I feel different, I said. Not fixed. Not healed. But free. There's a kind of peace that comes not from being loved, but from finally loving yourself enough to stop begging for what should have been freely given. That night, I didn't think about my mother's text, or my father's silence, or the empty years between 16 and 26. I thought about the girl in Kentucky, the one in Alabama, the ones who wrote to me, crying through their keyboards, telling me they didn't know someone like them could grow up and speak this loud. I didn't feel like a symbol. I felt like a mirror. And for once, I liked what I saw. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.